Good day guys, so I'm Dexter Allen Abule and I'm going to tackle about the topic Raspberry Pi activity number 3. So first let's talk about Python. So what is Python? Python is a high-level general-purpose programming language that is interpreted, and the use of substantial indentation in its design philosophy promotes code and readability. Its language features and objects-oriented approach are aimed at assisting programmers in writing clear code, logical codes, and for both small and large-scale projects. Good day guys, so I'm Dexter Allen Abule and I'm going to tackle about the topic Raspberry Pi activity number 3. So first let's talk about Python. So what is Python? Python is a high-level general-purpose programming language that is interpreted, and the use of substantial indentation in its design philosophy promotes code and readability. Its language features and objects-oriented approach are aimed at assisting programmers in writing clear code, logical codes, and for both small and large-scale projects. Next is keyboard input. Users' input are surprisingly simple to code in Python, and yet they are very quite valuable. The users can interact with the computer and modify the program circumstances using these inputs. And we will use the variable flash Python to the LEDs on and off times. So numeric types. Numeric types is a kind or an employed to help the computer to figure out what kind of number it's looking at. So in Python, there are four numeric types. First is the int or integers. It is the whole number, the float decimals, long recurring decimals, and the complex imaginary roots. Now I'm going to give the definition of the four numeric kinds. So first is an integer. So it is a data that from integral data type or a data type that represents some range of mathematical integers, and integral data types may be different size and may or may not be allowed to contain negative values. Integers are commonly represented computers as a group of binary digits. Next is floating or floated floats, and the definition of this command is to rest on the surface of a suspended in a fluid to a or to drift on a true or as if a true fluid yellow leaves. And third is the long, and long is a data type used in programming language such as in Java, C++, C Sharp, and it is a constant variable defined as long can store a single 64-bit signed integer. Because the long data type is signed, that is possible integers from 0, 9, 2, 3, 37, 0, 36, 8, 54, including 0. And the last numeric type is a term that describes the base 10 number system. Probably the most commonly used number system that the decimal number system consists of 10 single digits number from 0 to 9, and in computing the binary, octal, or hexadecimal number system may be used instead of decimal system. And now I'm going to show some videos to show how Python works.
Concepts in programming. We use variables to store data in computer's memory. Here are a few examples. I'm going to define a variable called students underline count and setting it to 1,000. When we run this program, Python interpreter will allocate some memory and store this number 1000 in that memory space. Then it will have this variable reference that memory location. So this variable is just like a label for that memory location. We can use this variable or this label anywhere in our program to get access to that memory location and the data stored there. So now if we print students count and run our program, we will get the number 1000. So this is the basic of variables. Now, what kind of data can we store in computer's memory? Well, we have several different kinds of data. In this section, we're going to look at the built-in primitive types in Python. Primitive types can be numbers, booleans, and strings. Let me show you. So here we have a whole number. We refer to this as an integer in programming. We can also have numbers with a decimal point. Let's take a look. So rating, we set this to 4.99. This is what we call a float or a floating point number. And this terminology is not specific to Python. In the future, when you learn a new programming language, you're going to hear these terms again. Now let's take a look at an example of a Boolean. Is published, we set this to true or false. These are examples of Boolean values in programming. So Boolean values can either be true or false, and these are exactly like yes and no in English. Later in the course, you will learn that we'll use these Boolean values to make decisions in our programs. For example, if the user is an admin user, perhaps we want to give them extra permissions. So these are the Boolean values. Now take into account that Python is a case-sensitive language, which means lowercase and uppercase characters have different meanings. So Boolean values should always start with a capital letter, like what you see here. If we type false or false, these are not accepted Boolean values in Python. Only what you see here is a valid Boolean value. So false or true. And finally, let's take a look at an example of a string. So course underline name, we set this to a string like Python programming. So a string, as I told you before, is like text. Whenever you want to work with text in your programs, you need to surround your text with quotes. So these are the basics of variables. The question for you. There are 4 things that I have consistently used in this program. Can you spot them? If you want, you can pause the video, think about this for a few seconds, and then continue watching. So here are those 4 things. The first thing is that all my variable names are descriptive and meaningful. So students count represents the number of students for a course. Or course name clearly explains that this variable holds the name of a course. One of the issues that I see a lot amongst beginner programmers is that they use mystical names for their variables. Something like this. CN, as in short for course name. When someone else reads this code, they have no idea what CN stands for. Or they use variable names like C1. When I look at that code, I wonder, where is C2? And what is the difference between C1 and C2? So these variable names are very mystical. That's a bad practice. Make sure your variable names are always descriptive and meaningful because this makes your code more maintainable. Now, there are times that you can use short variable names like X, Y, Z if you're dealing with things like coordinates. So that's an exception. Now, the second thing that I have consistently used in this code is that I have used lowercase letters to name my variables. So here we don't have course name all in capital or in title case. All letters are lowercase, right? Let's delete these. The third thing that I've consistently used here is that I have used an underscore to separate multiple words. And I've done this to make my variable names more readable. Because in Python, we cannot have a space in variable names, so we cannot have course name. And if you put these 2 words together, it's a little bit hard to read. That's why we use an underscore. And the fourth thing that I have used consistently here is that I have put a space around this equal sign. Again, that's one of the issues I see a lot amongst beginners. They write code like this. This is a little bit ugly. This is what we call dirty code. dirty, stinky, smelly. You should write code that is clean and beautiful so other people can read it like a story, like a newspaper article. It should be formatted properly. And that's why we have PEP 8 in Python. Now, the good thing is if you forget these rules, when you save the changes, AutoPEP 8 kicks in and it automatically reformats your code. But that aside, you should always give yourself the habit of writing clean code without relying too much on the tooling. So these are all the best practices about naming your variables. Next, we're going to look at strings in more detail.
I hope you like the video and learn something. Goodbye and thank you guys.